In this video, I'm going to go over top stitch and a little bit on puckering. For those of you who don't have any experience with sewing, top stitching is a sewing technique where the line of stitching is designed to be seen from the outside of the garment. It can sometimes be decorative, it can sometimes be functional, but the best thing that you could go and look at in most cases if you're trying to understand what top stitching is to go look at a t-shirt. You'll usually see it at um, the cuffs, the hem, and at the neckline. Okay. Um, to get started, I'm using file 002 materials, and this was a white polo that I've already taken the time to update. You'll see if I zoom in very, very closely that I have updated the fabric. Okay, so the fabric is a knit piqué, and you'll see I've added a rib to the collar. I've also updated the buttons, and all of this can be seen on my object browser. So again, as we go into bill of materials on Thursday, I want you to make sure that you're paying very close attention to everything that's going into your garment, the appropriate fabrics, the buttons. You can see I've updated that to pink. The buttonhole that would correspond, I've updated that to pink. And then next would be our top stitching. Okay. Now I'm going to zoom out and just pan over to the sleeve, and this is where I will begin to apply some top stitch. Now you do have top stitches available to you under hardware in your Clo library, but I'm going to run through adding a custom version. And I'll go ahead and call this custom, and I will go ahead and set my properties in my property editor. Now as I customize this, I want you to be able to see what I'm doing. And so I'll go ahead and introduce your tools. You'll see here that you have top stitch tools. And if I just close again my browser and my editor for a moment, you can see the puckering tools that are present as well. Okay. Now I'm going to go more deeply over top stitching because puckering works almost exactly the same. It just yields a different effect. So again, getting these panels open so you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to go ahead and apply a quick top stitch to the sleeve. You'll see that you have an edit tool like you do with everything else, and then you have segment, free, and then seam line. So segment and free works essentially the way you'd expect. I'm going to find a segment, I'm going to click it, and in a moment you'll see some top stitch become visible here very close to the pattern's edge. All right, and it's coming in white. Again, it's linked to my custom, so I'm going to go ahead and click that and start to edit. Now, if you spend some time making changes, especially if you create something custom, you can go ahead and save that out so you can open it again later. You also, if you've already done that, you can open from this location. You'll see it's been renamed to match, so it's called custom. And again, if I were a company and I was assigning item numbers, I could go ahead and enter one here. Now, I'm working under the category of top stitch, and there are two different kinds of top stitch. One is an OBJ, and that's something that works very much like everything else in this program. It's 3D, and it's going to generate height and give some realism to the garment. There's also a texture option that I'll come back to a little bit later. You'll see offset is the offset from the pattern's edge. So 1/16 of an inch is very, very small. I'm going to go ahead and set this up to 1/2 inch, and you're going to see that move. Okay, if you're not sure what to set your offset to, the best advice I have is to go get a similar garment out of your closet. And if you just grab a ruler, you can make some educated guesses as to what is going to look appropriate on your avatar. You'll see that you have stitch count. So I could create 1, 2, I'm going to go ahead and create 3 just to show that. Okay, and if I zoom in closely, you'll see that there are now 3 stitches. Okay, for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to leave this set to 1 because you'll see here as you add additional stitches, you've got multiple tabs to update. Okay, so to keep this brief, I'm going to leave it to 1. And as I scroll down, you'll see specifications. I can change the shape of my stitch, so I could take it to something like a zigzag. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and leave that as a single stitch. You'll see that you have length, which is stitches per inch. So this currently is set to 14. I'll go ahead and change this maybe to 10. And it's not going to visibly change too much because I don't have any space between my stitches. It looks like one continuous line. So I'm going to go through and put maybe 0.05. Okay, typically your stitches are pretty close together. I'm going to go ahead and actually increase that to 0.1 just to make it easier for you to see what I'm doing. Okay. So I've got more space, and I'm going to go ahead and increase my thickness. It's set to 40 currently. I'm going to set it up to 100. Again, just to make it easier for you guys to see. Now here, and just going back to that too, you may have a top stitch that is more decorative and you want it to be larger and you want it to be in maybe a contrasting color. Play with that thickness. That's something that you can feel free to do. In terms of material, you'll see the common settings are present under this area. When I think of stitches, I tend to think of matte or shiny. Often, you want it to either contrast or you want it to blend in. So I want you to think about that as you make your choices. Texture, again, is related to texture up above, and I'll come back to that in a little while. Color, I'll go ahead and change again, just because I do want this to be very contrasting so you can see it. You can change things like opacity. You'll recall that I spoke about reflection and roughness during the materials lecture yesterday, so I won't go into that. You'll see here facing. I can determine whether I want this in the front or if I want this in the back. And that comes into play often if you are working with something like a collar, that when you fold it down, you're looking at the back of the fabric. So again, you can reverse that. Another really simple trick that you can do as well in your 3D window, if you select something like the collar and just right click, you'll find an option for flip normal. Okay, so two ways to get to the same place. I want to make sure you know that that's there. I'll go back to my stitch. You'll see also that you have this option for 3D. I'm going to turn that on. I'm pretty sure I clicked that on. All right, there we go. And what that's just going to do is it's going to apply normal map that's going to make the stitches appear like they're sinking into the fabric. So I'm going to increase this a little bit. The intensity is going to make it darker. And I'll go ahead and jack that up. And you'll start to see a line appear around my stitches. And the other thing I can do to make it easier to see is I will just increase the thickness to 0.25. Okay, and that 0.25 is not going to be great for this. Okay. If I simulate, my stitches won't be present, but you can see what that looks like. Okay, I'm going to take that off. Again, you can see that sinking in. I will turn off 3D for the time being. And then just quickly, I'm going to come over to my library. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble with my mouse today. I'm going to come over to my library. And again, you have a variety of top stitching available. If you go under hardware and trims and go under top stitch, you'll see a number of commonly used styles. And what I'm going to do is just click and drag one over here. Okay. And again, I've created a custom. I can use one from the library, and I can do the same thing and work through this. So in this instance, for this 2 needle, I will change it to 1/8. Okay, and I'm going to leave everything else as is. I've walked you through how to create a segment. I'm going to go through and show quickly how to create using the free top stitch tool. And I'm going to apply that here on my placket. Okay. So I'm going to bring that down. I'm going to pan over in my 2D window, and I'll zoom in a little bit. And I can apply top stitching here in a couple of ways. Again, I'll just close this so I have a little bit more room to work. And you'll see I can use my segment, because this is a segment. I can go ahead and click, and I'll click, These are actually 2 segments here, but I'm going to do this just for the sake of applying this quickly. And what you're going to see if you apply your top stitching this way is that if I have a segment here and a segment here and a segment here, these will all end up crossing. Okay. And you'll see that happening here. Okay. And that's not technically correct, so I'm going to grab my edit top stitch and I'm just going to hit my delete key. You can also right click to access delete. And instead this time I'm going to use my free top stitch. And again, it's just like free sewing. I'm just going to work around the edge, come up to the top. I'll go ahead and apply it across. I'll let go. Okay, and you'll see the difference here. Okay, I'll get a much cleaner look. Okay, so I want you to be conscious again of where you're applying that and what is appropriate. Okay, the other place that you can apply top stitching is here, and this is where you would actually use that third option, which is seam line top stitch. And that is where you have 2 pattern pieces that are being sewn together. Okay, and that'll just save you some time. I can apply it to one area and it'll apply the top stitch on both sides for me. Okay, and so to do that, I just want to make sure I'm in the right place. I am. And again, I will go ahead and use the double. And all I need to do again is make sure I am on my seam line top stitch. And I will click and click to close. And I'll give that a moment. And you'll see again what I mean when I say that that will be applied on both sides of that seam, again, where those 2 pattern pieces are being sewn together at the top. Okay. What I will do quickly here is I will go ahead and apply some puckering. Now, again, you have your segment, your free, and your seam line. I'm going to go ahead and apply the seam line just because I'm already up here. Okay, and if you didn't notice previously, if you didn't notice it previously, when you apply top stitch, this line will go hot pink. You can still see it there. And when you apply puckering, it'll go purple. All right, I'll zoom in a little bit here. And I'm going to go ahead with that active. Actually, I don't need that active. I'm going to go to my property editor in my object browser. And you're going to see that you do have an option for puckering. Okay, so if you want puckering to be present on your garment, you'll want that to be on your BOM. So make sure you apply it. And with that active, I can make some edits here. I can change things like the density and the width. And I'm sorry. And when you're applying your puckering, you'll see density is going to pertain to how close the puckering details are. So I can go ahead and increase that. And then the width is going to be the length of the puckering. So if I raise that number, the puckering will extend. I'll just give that a second to apply. And I'm going to go ahead and increase that to maybe 1 inch just to be dramatic. Okay. Now I'm realizing that this is actually not working because I didn't make these edits before I applied my puckering. So let me see if that makes a difference. So again, I've got my edit puckering. I'm going to delete this. Okay. With that active and my puckering tool, I'll go ahead and apply that now. And I'm just going to adjust this. My view is terrible. And you can see it. Okay, there it is. I'm sorry. I was having trouble seeing it here. You can see this being applied, and it is this fabric that's making it a little bit difficult to see here. You can see where I accidentally applied the puckering running down the armhole, and you can see that present here. Okay, see that? And there you go. Actually, there's a better angle. All right. And you can see these lines coming off. Okay, I thought I was going crazy there for a moment. Okay, so that is a quick just tutorial on, again, top stitch and puckering. The only other thing I wanted to go back to quickly is applying different textures for your top stitch. And to do that, I'm just going to add another top stitch. For this one, I am going to keep the stitch count at 1. I'm going to go ahead and change from OBJ to texture. And I'm going to scroll down, okay, and get to where you see this option for texture. I'm going to click on this so I can open a window. I am going to where I have some different options saved, and these are available to you on the Google Drive. Okay, and I have a couple of different options. I have just a little white rectangle that I can use to create a tape. I have some shapes that I could use to create decorative stitching. I have a trim tape present, and in this case I'll go ahead and use my trim tape. Okay, and you'll see that that's present there. And let's see, I will zoom out. I will zoom out here and pan. And let me just find a quick area to apply this. I'll go ahead and update maybe the style on my sleeve. And I'll zoom in again so you can see that as I work. Okay, I will come over to my sleeve here, and I will just drag my top stitch, my new style, on the top stitch that I have present. It's going to take a moment to work. Okay, and you can see that trim being applied. Okay, so it works almost like a brush. It's using, again, it's just a little image and it's being repeated very much like a graphic. I can create another one, and this time maybe I'll change that texture. Thinking about Lacey and her gemstones, I'll go ahead and apply a gemstone to this one. Change that to texture. I'll try changing that at the shoulder. All right. Let me make sure it actually has the image attached. Open. All right, there we go. Okay, and if I zoom in, okay, again, you can see those little gemstones being applied. So that's something, again, that you can just play with. I'd like to see you play with your top stitch, play with those options that I put on the Google Drive for you, just so you can see how those work. It may give you some ideas for other things that you might like to apply. Some of you have some graphics that, if they were scaled down, might actually make sense as a little bit of trim on your garments. All right, that's it, guys.